Oh, thanks for joining us again. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Bell Curve, where we're talking everything school psychology, testing, and education. Today, I have some super special guests. Not only are they special to me privately, but also to professionally. So, on my far right here, I have Dr. Nika Jones. In the middle, I have Dr. Heather Arduengo. And right next to me, I have Dr. Allante Lumas. And today, we're going to talk about what is a school psychologist and what is our role, why is it important, and why you should know about it. Okay. So before we get into that, I want us to first start talking about where can we find you ladies? Like, where do you work?
Well, I'll go. I work at a private practice in downtown Fort Worth where we provide both educational and private evaluations for a variety of disorders, ADHD, learning disorders, things like that. So I am primarily downtown Fort Worth.
Excellent. And Dr. Arduengo?
Yes, I started off in the school district, but I also have my own private practice right now, specializing in psychological evaluation for children and adults.
Cool.
And I am currently working in Frisco ISD, and I have a private practice, a private counseling practice, and I do some psychometry work for another private practice.
Okay. Amazing. All right. So now that everybody knows where to find you, let's jump into it. What is a school psychologist? And I feel like we are the best kept secret in education. We are rock stars, but a lot of people don't know what we do. So, anybody want to start?
I'll start. So, a school psychologist can mostly be found in the school setting. I think one of the great things that we contribute to the field is our specialized knowledge and special education, and then just really trying to find ways to improve student outcomes within the school setting.
Excellent. I always feel like we're the gatekeepers of special ed, okay? And special education has gone through so many reiterations and it has evolved from when it first started in like 1975, which is crazy. That's like almost a half a century ago. But we really protect that because when I think about special education, I think about civil rights and a student's rights and parents' rights as well. Any other thoughts about what you feel like our role really is and what it is important to the community?
Oh,
I know you mentioned the point of us being gatekeepers, and I hate that people see us as that way because I
Okay.
feel like we're not necessarily gatekeepers because that means we're trying to keep or prevent people from receiving supports and services, but I think we're one of the biggest advocates for kids in the school setting,
Yeah.
as it relates to academic, social, emotional functioning. So we're big a big part of the IEP team and things like that, and I feel like we're huge advocates.
Okay, so I had two comments. Okay, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I feel like we bridge the gap. I feel like
Mm.
we bridge the gap between the school and the
Excellent.
home. We bring it all together and we make sure that the student has what they need.
Okay, very good. Sorry, I just had two thoughts because it's interesting when I use the term gatekeeper and how some people feel like no, 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 let me in. But at the same token, we think about least restrictive environment. And so that's really important too. We never want to identify a child with a disability or continue to give them services if they truly don't need it. So I do think sometimes that gatekeeping, even though it does have negative connotation, can also be very positive as well. Very good. Yes, bridging the gap. Okay. Oh, you mentioned something that I don't think our audience may necessarily know. What's the IEP?
Ooh. We use a lot of acronyms in special education in school settings. IEP is Individualized Education Plan. And it's basically a plan tailored to the needs of that particular student. So whether that be academic needs, emotional behavioral needs, speech therapy, I mean, the list can go on and on.
So is it just specialized to Texas or is IEP?
That
Nope.
federal,
Yeah, it's
nationwide.
federal, it's everywhere. It can follow you.
So that's a great point. So if a family has a student, a child who identifies, who meets disability criteria, if they move to another state, they don't necessarily have to start the process all over again.
No.
No, that's the great
Exactly.
thing about an IEP.
Excellent. So those services can continue.
Yeah,
And we
everything.
always tell parents, because some parents will say, I'm worried if we move districts, will this document follow my
Yep.
child? And
Mhm.
yes, it will follow them.
Amazing. And that's very important for continuity of services.
Yeah, and then oftentimes we will talk with that other district if they move. Like they're able to reach out to us and we can make sure that the student gets what they need.
Excellent. I know we try to capture as much as we can legally on paper, but I know there's so much about a child sometimes that necessarily can't be read on paper. Amazing. Okay, so let's hop in to what I feel like is a very important conversation. What is the difference between a school-based evaluation and a clinical evaluation? So like I was mentioning earlier, all you ladies, all of us have experienced working in the schools and then transitioning out of the school setting. And so I know for myself, that's one of the main things that clients coming to me from the clinical setting, it's like, hey, the school said this. Or sometimes when I'm at the school, I have other colleagues saying, hey, they have a clinical diagnosis. What does that mean? So what is the big difference between a school-based evaluation and a clinical evaluation? And is there a difference?
Yes.
Yes, there's a there's a huge difference. I would say one of the biggest components is for school-based, we're looking at IDEA criteria.
Oh, I'm sorry. And what is IDEA?
Yeah, Individuals Disability Education Act, and it specifically looks at whether a child qualifies for services under certain categories, like autism, learning disabilities. More so in the clinical setting, we're looking at diagnostic criteria under a mental health model.
We're using the DSM.
Yes.
And what's the DSM?
That's a good question. Diagnostic
Statistical Manual.
And we're on the fifth
edition.
Text revision.
Yes.
Yes.
So the DSM-5R. Excellent. Very good.
I would say another big component is going from looking at just maybe, let's say, 13 disability categories in the school setting compared to a list of over 100 disorders in the DSM. And that's a big change. That's a big transition.
It is. And like what Allante was saying earlier, like, even explaining to the parents, like the difference, like they'll be like, well, they have this, but in the school, that is not a category that we're looking at. So a lot of times we have to explain what that means and the difference.
And one of the other things about a school evaluation is there are two primary goals. We are not only looking at that educational eligibility, like we've talked about, but then there also has to be an impact into the school setting. What is that child educational need for specialized instruction? And so that's important because someone can have or meet the criteria for a diagnostic condition, but we in the school setting need to look at that impact. And do they need specialized instruction to help them make progress in the classroom?
Yes, and that can be difficult at times.
Yes, very difficult. And I know that we have our boots on the ground, we're in the game, we're in the trenches, but I do empathize with parents who are like, hey, my medical doctor said this. And their frustration when they come to the school setting and we're like, well, there's no educational need. And so do you all have any suggestions or ways or how you as professionals have been able to kind of explain that to parents to kind of really say, hey, this is what your child doesn't need or does need educationally?
I mean, I think just like that. I mean, explaining it in that manner and that, like Heather was saying, like they might have this diagnosis, but it may not be impacting them educationally. Like they're still doing fine. It doesn't mean that because they have this diagnosis that it's stopping anything happening academically. So I think it's really just explaining and talking to, and then a lot of times we are able to, if we need to communicate with the doctor, like there are instances where we're able to do that as well. So that helps a lot, being able to explain, I feel like, and be open and transparent and talking to the parents as well as doctors if we need to.
I did kind of want to touch on something that's a professional frustration of mine, and not to disrespect medical doctors because they are extremely smart. But, sometimes working with families and they try to argue or try to say, well, my doctor said this, as if your doctor is knowledgeable about school settings. And so sometimes that just trying to explain, I totally respect physicians. Their job is to keep your child alive versus our job is to educate, and just trying to explain that unfortunately those two systems don't always overlap in a way they should, I think, sometime to truly help a child in a family systems model. So, and the reason why I bring this up is because I had an experience when I was working on my PhD. I got to travel to Finland, and that was super dope experience. And, Finland is supposed to be world renowned for their education system. So when I was there, the first question I was asking about was like documentation, paperwork. It was actually kind of funny too. The school psychologist was at another campus. So I did kind of laugh at that. When I was like, can I speak to your school psych? And they're like, oh, they're not here. I was like, of course, because they're out traveling or doing something else. But it was interesting to me that there was no such thing as school setting medical setting. It was like children had one file, one system, and so it was all there. I'm not saying, I don't know if we can necessarily replicate that in the States. I'm not necessarily, we should, but I thought that that was extremely helpful, because I know sometimes even working in the school setting, it's frustrating when, for example, other health impairment. And so for a child to meet criteria, at least in the state of Texas, say they have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And if they have ADHD and we want to give them support for that ADHD, they first have to have a medical diagnosis. And, you know, that can be out of our hands. Like, hey, we love to give this child support. We love to give them what they need. But unfortunately, without the medical doctor signing off, that's can be a barrier sometimes. So just some thoughts.
That is fun in Texas, because in other states, we are able to give that diagnosis.
Oh.
We don't need the medical. Like I did my internship in Illinois,
Mhm.
and we didn't need a medical doctor. for
Okay.
that. So
Super dope.
And rules are changing across states. They're making it more to where school psychologists or other licensed professionals are able to accurately diagnose ADHD just based off the assessments that we give, which I think, like you said, we are able to do that.
And a lot of times we do more than what the medical doctor will do. They'll hand out one little form while we do this extensive testing. So
And so real quick, can you kind of touch on that testing? What does that look like versus the medical doctor?
Oh, okay. Well, just from my experience with medical doctors, I know that parents usually will take their child to the doctor, say, hey, my kid is presenting with these symptoms. You know, they're hyperactive. They can't sit still. They talk too much. They blurt out. And the doctor will say, okay, here's a Vanderbilt, which is a rating scale. And they say, take this to your child's teachers. And then usually the parent will take it to the school. The teachers will fill it out. The parent will fill it out. They'll take it back to the doctor. The doctor will score it up and they will say, hey, based off these ratings, your child meets criteria.
Now, what does one of ours as school psychologists look like?
much more than that. We're doing observations across settings. We are getting information from not only the parents, from the teachers, from the student. We're doing, like I said, multiple observations. It's just so much more, a lot more paperwork. I know the parents hate seeing us come sometimes.
Yes.
Teachers too. So we get a lot more information for sure.
And you know, I'm laughing because, and I know I had texted you two ladies about it the other day. I was in the process of scoring an evaluation, and one of the teachers put a post-it note and said, "This is a lot." And so I kind of chuckled because I was like, you know what? I respect this lady's time, but she didn't understand what I was doing and why I was doing it. So all the forms that we give truly provide good empirical data to see where this child is at. And again, like we were talking about earlier, just keeping in mind of least restrictive environment, or the way I conceptualize what we do. I never want to put a disability on a child if they truly don't need it. So I try to be as thorough as possible. So to all you teachers out there, I respect your time. I truly do, but your information is vital, and thank you for completing my forms.
We do. We appreciate y'all.
Yes, totally do.
Parents too.
Parents,
Yes.
thank you. I think about that. You know, everybody's like, I want an evaluation. And I think sometimes they think we just, even though we're great, we're not that great. They think we just walk in the room, it's like, yep, that right there, you know. And for us, it doesn't work that way. We truly need everybody's information. And I think that goes into informed consent. And so I think that's another big part of what we do before we even get started doing it, is that I try to really make it a habit of really explaining to parents, and sometimes even over explaining what we do and why we do it, so that all parties involved at least have an understanding of the process, and understanding that it's a process that's going to take time. I'll never forget when I first started working in an urban school district here in Texas, wink, wink. When I started working there, my principal told me, "Oh, Chrishawn, the eval is 20 minutes. What?
Yeah.
That even, I mean, it was 20 minutes just to produce the consent forms, not even just to go, you know, just to go over them with the parents. I mean, real quick, since I brought this up, what do you say the average time when you think about school-based, when you were at the schoolhouse, what average amount of time do you think it took for you to do an eval?
Honestly, I really do feel like it depends on the child. There's so many
It does.
unique needs
Mhm.
that and factors that can play a role. But you also have to think about, is this an initial school evaluation? This is also something that is important because in special education, once you qualify, you are required to reevaluate every 3 years. But if we're talking about an initial school-based evaluation, we're probably looking at cognitive information, academic information. So I want to say maybe even 8 to 10 hours
Mhm.
for an evaluation,
And
collecting all of that
yeah,
data.
and you also have to consider some of the kids come in with a lot of complex issues. So we're having to do a really detailed review of records. We're contacting outside providers, sometimes therapists, sometimes, medical doctors and things like that. So we also have to factor in all of that time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, just thinking back to when I first started, 20 minutes, just really it's like no, just really, and I say that kind of facetiously, but I truly want anybody watching our show, whether you're a parent or educator, to really understand the depth that goes into the evals. And that's not even including if we get a speech therapist. That's not even including we get an occupational therapist or a physical therapist or a music therapist. All of these individuals really have to work with your child, collect that data to see what their educational needs are.
Yeah, and I would say that's. Oh, sorry. That's probably like the biggest difference as well. In the school, it's team based, and a lot of times when you're in private practice, you are a lone wolf. Like we do rely on each other often, just to get that feedback. But it is a team process, and we are relying on multiple people, multiple disciplines to help us in that process.
Excellent.
So parents, if you get a report that is 30 plus pages, it's okay. Just know that a lot of people were involved in your child's evaluation. And we're gonna have a really good report for you.
And we hope you read it, not just a summary.
Yes.
And I will say sometimes, and I know, and I hope as more episodes, we're able to produce more episodes on Beyond the Bell Curve. I just wanted to kind of touch on one of the biggest misconceptions about what we do and why we do it is that they just put my child, duh, duh, duh. And I never want any parent or educator to ever feel that because there's a lot of work that goes into it, especially now. Like I mentioned before, special education services, as we understand them in the United States, has really evolved over the last 50 years. And in the modern times, if your child is being referred for an evaluation, I want parents to know, or at least to expect or to understand that these professionals who have been tasked with this are really going to put in a lot of effort to really understand your child and get to know their needs. And so I'm so protective of our field and what we do and why we do it. And I really want just society to know that when people say, oh, they just did this at school, like, no, 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 no. Like, please work with your school, work with them, ask questions. Find out who your school psychologist is. I know we like to hide. I bet those school psychologists like, shh, shh, shh. But no, really, find out the people who are doing your child's evaluation. I mean, if they don't contact you, contact them, because I really think there's a breadth of knowledge there and kind of build that rapport that I think to help or demystify the process. Okay.
And I think one of the things you mentioned was find out who your school psychologist is. We are not school counselors, no disrespect to school counselors, but we do different assessments. And so just finding out who your person is, go to the school and say, hey, who is my school psychologist? Who is the person that is going to be involved in this evaluation? And it's just simple questions like that.
And two things about that. I have two of my girlfriends. It's really kind of funny. One of them was like, oh my gosh, it's school counselors week. I forgot to tell you happy school counselors week. And so my other girlfriend knows that I'm not a school counselor, and we just started laughing. So now every once in a while when something goes left that's not quite right, she's like, happy school counselors week. And I laugh because you're right, we're not school counselors, even though, again, no disrespect, school counselors are amazing, but that's just not necessarily what we do as school psychologists. And there was another point. I don't miss it that quick. That's okay.
Schools, find out who we are.
Oh,
Go to the
yeah.
school and ask.
That's what I want to touch on. And it's really interesting too that even in the school setting, people don't know who we are.
Yes.
Yes. And that's another conversation. But yeah, so we're out there, and I think it's just a good note. I wanted to wrap it up. I just wanted this to be information. I made that up. I want this to be good information for the community, not only for parents, but also educators. Like I said, as we do more episodes of Beyond the Bell Curve, I want this to hopefully be interactive. I hope people comment and share. And just, if anything else, I want to encourage people. One of my taglines is be encouraged, be empowered, and be joyful. Find out who these professionals are in your school setting. You know, if you have questions, I don't ever want any parent or community member to feel intimidated by the special education process and or clinical evaluation, either in private practice. I'm gonna end on that note. Maybe we'll do another episode. You ladies will come back with, or maybe a little bit later, and we'll talk about solely clinical stuff, because we could talk forever about schools.
Yes. we can.
And so lastly, again, I just want to thank all three of these professionals. They are wonderful. These two in particular, Dr. Jones and Dr. Arduengo, I feel like we grew up together. We started off at Texas Women's University so many years ago, not knowing anything. And the fact that we've been in the field for over 10 years, amazing. And even Dr. Lumas, I feel like we've grown up in a different way. When I met Dr. Lumas, I was midway, well, I don't know if I'm midway through my career, but I've been doing it a while. But when I first met Dr. Lumas, I had just became a mom. And so she had a young child too. And I feel that we grew up in ways in motherhood. So I feel truly blessed to have these ladies. Thank you again for coming on this show with me.
Thank you.
And I look forward to our next episode. Thank you.